The latest updates surrounding Mercedes' alleged compression ratio loophole significantly shift the direction of the conversation. The regulations have indeed been tightened. The 130 degrees Celsius hot test has been brought forward to June 1, 2026, and the wording now explicitly prohibits any mechanism designed to increase the compression ratio under operating conditions. On paper, that is a clear attempt to eliminate any potential gray area, but the technical facts matter more than the narrative. Mercedes' power unit has already been tested at both ambient temperature and at 130 degrees Celsius, and in both instances, it remained within the 16.1 limit. That means the regulatory change does not force a fundamental redesign of their concept. In the context of modern power unit development, where architecture is effectively locked in, that level of stability is significant. Rivals had suggested the potential gain could be worth as much as 0.3 of a second per lap. Mercedes maintained it was marginal at best. The gap between those claims underlines one important point: no independently verified figure has ever been made public. What we do have now is the outcome of official scrutiny. From 2027 onwards, only the hot test will apply. That alters the design emphasis across the grid, particularly in how teams manage thermal expansion and internal tolerances. If Mercedes are already comfortable meeting the limit under both conditions, they are not starting from scratch. So, has the FIA's intervention inadvertently clarified that Mercedes' technical foundation for 22.6 is already where it needs to be? We'll break down the performance implications in detail. Make sure you're subscribed and stay with us to the end. To understand why this matters, it is worth revisiting how the controversy emerged in the first place. The 2026 regulations limit the geometric compression ratio of the internal combustion engine to 16.1, measured under defined conditions. Until now, those checks were conducted at ambient temperature. That left open a theoretical scenario in which an engine could comply when cold, yet behave differently once fully up to operating temperature. Mercedes found themselves at the center of suspicion when it emerged that they had interpreted the regulations in a way that allowed them to optimize the engine's behavior under heat. Rivals suggested that while the unit passed the room temperature checks, it might exceed the effective limit once running at race conditions. There were even suggestions that the engine could be operating closer to 18 when hot, despite the formal cap being set at 16.1. The governing body, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, responded by seeking a compromise solution. Initially, the proposal had been to introduce the hot condition test from August 1, 2026. That would have allowed more than half the season to unfold under the original interpretation. However, following discussions within the F1 Commission and a vote by the World Motorsport Council, the implementation date was brought forward to June 1, 2026. The FIA's statement was unambiguous. A significant effort has been invested in finding a solution to the topic of the compression ratio. It said the compression ratio, it noted, was one of the fundamental targets of the 2026 regulations, designed partly to attract new manufacturers into the sport. The compromise determined that the compression ratio would be controlled in both hot and cold conditions from June 1, 2026, and subsequently only in operating conditions at 130 degrees Celsius from 2027 onwards. The revised wording of the regulations leaves little room for interpretation. It now explicitly states that any component, assembly, mechanism, or integrated arrangement designed or functioning to increase the compression ratio in operating conditions beyond 16.0 is prohibited. In other words, the gray area that rivals feared has been closed in black and white. And yet, the critical development is not the tightening of the rule, but the outcome of the testing. According to reports from BBC Sport, citing senior F1 insiders, the Mercedes power unit has already been assessed by the FIA at both ambient and operating temperature. In both cases, it was under the 16.1 limit. That aligns with the position articulated forcefully by Toto Wolff. The power unit is legal, Wolff said. The power unit corresponds to how the regulations are written. The power unit corresponds to how the checks are being done. The power unit corresponds to how these things are measured in any other vehicle. He later dismissed the entire episode as a storm in a teacup. That may have sounded defensive at the height of the debate, but with the new tests in place and the engine still compliant, the tone now reads rather differently. Rival teams had been far less relaxed. Some suggested the potential gain from an advantageous compression strategy could be as much as 13 brake horsepower, translating to 3 or 4/10 of a second per lap. Wolff countered that such figures were exaggerated, describing any benefit as worth only a couple of horsepower at best. The truth of the precise performance delta remains internal to the manufacturers, but the official test results narrow the field of speculation considerably. It is also important to consider the engineering reality. Power unit architecture for 22.6 is not something that can be reworked on a whim. The internal combustion engine, turbo layout, energy recovery systems, and associated cooling structures are deeply integrated. If the new dual-condition test had exposed a fundamental noncompliance, the corrective action would have been neither trivial nor swift. The absence of such disruption suggests that whatever Mercedes have done in controlling thermal expansion and combustion chamber behavior is intrinsic to the design rather than an add-on exploit. From June 1st until the end of 2026, engines will need to satisfy both ambient and 130 degrees Celsius tests. That is, if anything, a stricter standard than what will follow in 2027, when only the hot test will apply. Typically, compression ratio tends to decrease as temperatures rise due to material expansion and changing tolerances. Designing an engine that remains close to the regulatory ceiling when hot, without exceeding it when cold, requires extremely precise control of component geometry. If Mercedes are already operating comfortably within that window, they may in fact be well positioned for the shift to a hot-only measurement regime in 2000. While rivals have framed the rule change as a clampdown aimed squarely at Brackley, the longer-term landscape may be more nuanced. There has also been an element of politics woven through this saga. Public praise from Mercedes regarding the performance of rival power units, and vice versa, has at times carried strategic undertones. By highlighting perceived strengths elsewhere, teams can shape the regulatory environment and influence scrutiny. In this case, the push for additional testing came from competitors who believed there was an advantage to be neutralized. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur even described aspects of the regulatory handling as embarrassing, criticizing what he saw as a lack of clarity as the new season approached. Yet, the unanimous approval of the revised wording and the early implementation date indicate that, at least formally, consensus has been restored. The broader context is that 22.6 represents one of the most significant regulatory resets in modern Formula One. The compression ratio target was intended as part of a framework that would balance efficiency, sustainability, and manufacturer accessibility. Energy management systems and deployment strategies remain under ongoing evaluation by the FIA, which has confirmed that further technical checks in that area are continuing. Within that environment, stability of concept is valuable. Mercedes logged more mileage than any other team during pre-season testing, and Wolff admitted that it was a relief that the car felt fundamentally sound. "It's a relief that we started testing, and it actually feels decent," he said. "The drivers are quite pleased with the car on the stopwatch. We know that we are not miles off." He also cautioned against reading too much into testing data, noting that 10 kilograms of fuel load can make 3 to 3.5 tenths of a second difference in lap time. That reminder is relevant to the compression debate as well. In a field where margins are often measured in hundredths, claims of multi-tenth advantages demand careful scrutiny.